7, 6, 11, 5, 9 and 20 miles today, 4, 11, 17, 32 the day before. Boot, 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 moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the war. Don't look at what's in front of you. Boot, 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 moving up and down again. Men go mad with watching them. There's no discharge in the war.
In a world defined by infection, collapse, and decades of silence, what's there left to do? For the 28 Days Later universe, the themes of loss and trauma seem to be at the forefront. But for 28 years, the last thing you'd expect to find is love. The franchise has always been about more than rage or zombies. At its core, it's a story about what remains after the world collapses. Before we talk about 28 years later, we need to go back. All the way back to where the entire tone of the trilogy was first shaped. The film doesn't feel futuristic or dystopian, it feels ancient, like a ghost of its former self. In those iconic opening scenes, Jim wanders through empty streets that feel more like abandoned monuments than modern roads. There's something almost mythic about it, like London has reverted to older, quieter times. The film draws parallel between the collapse of society and the collapse of historical eras. It's nostalgia through ambience. The film asks us to mourn what the world used to be, without ever showing us the normal world itself. This is Britain, stripped not only of people, but of time. The universe creates a surreal sense of temporal dissociation. It's a world that feels medieval in its silence, Victorian in its ruins, post-industrial in its decay, and yet recognisably modern. This layering creates a feeling of a country stuck between eras, a Britain dragged backwards through its own history. The sense of nostalgia isn't warm. It's a reminder that civilization is fragile, and that under all of our modern infrastructure lies something older, rawer, and more human. The reason I bring this up is that it sets the stage perfectly for 28 years later, where nostalgia becomes not just thematic, but generational. By the time we reach 28 years later, nostalgia has transformed into something new. The world hasn't just lost its past. An entire generation has now grown up without knowing it. Spike, the young protagonist, doesn't remember pre-collapse Britain. He doesn't remember the old world, the cities, the culture, the beauty. For him, nostalgia is inherited, a concept, not a memory. This is where the new film's emotional core emerges. In a world with no history left to cling to, love becomes the only thing worth remembering. While earlier films focused on survival, fear, and societal decay, 28 years later makes an unexpected pivot. The message is not to remember survival, remember civilization, or remember fear. Spike's entire journey, every risk, every moment of bravery, every choice, stems from his devotion to his mother. This isn't a symbolic love or a convenient plot device. It's the emotional backbone of the movie. But love is deliberate, love is chosen, and love is remembered. In a world stripped of humanity, Spike's love becomes the only thing that feels truly alive. Apocalyptic narratives often highlight cruelty and despair, but 28 years later subverts this by presenting love not as a weakness, but as endurance. Spike's love for his mother triumphs over the fear of the infected and the fear of the world around him. In a narrative universe defined by rage, violence, and collapse, Spike becomes the antidote. A reminder that even after nearly 3 decades of devastation, humanity is still capable of compassion. The world has forgotten itself, but Spike insists on remembering what matters. And this is where love and nostalgia intertwine. The nostalgia in 28 Days Later was a longing for a world that has already gone. But in 28 years later, nostalgia becomes hopeful, a longing for a world that could still be rebuilt. Spike doesn't long for skyscrapers, culture, or civilization. He longs for connection. In this way, 28 Years Later pulls the franchise into a full thematic circle. The first film was about what humanity lost. In this film, it's about what humanity can still reclaim. Nostalgia becomes not a backwards look at the past, but a forward look at what humanity could choose to be again. And at its core, 28 Years Later argues something bold. When history collapses, and when society is fractured, when decades pass in silence, the one thing humanity can still cling to is love. Spike's journey is not a quest for safety or salvation, it's a quest for connection. And that connection becomes the franchise's final message. Remember love. But with the upcoming release of 28 Years Later Bone Temple, we'll see where this longing for connection will really take him.